Hi, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church Stony Stratford, and we're continuing in our short talks in the book of Psalms. And today we're looking at another psalm from these 15 psalms that are called the Songs of Ascent, which means going up, and was probably these were psalms that were sung as the pilgrims went up to Jerusalem for the religious festivals. There's a proverb, a rolling stone gathers no moss. Now, I find that quite helpful. It shows that there is value in keeping going, not procrastinating, never taking anything for granted, because actually that's when problems start to develop. And in this psalm, David takes nothing for granted. The setting of the psalm is about worship. It starts in this way, verse 1 and 2. I rejoice with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Our feet are standing in your gates, O Jerusalem. It's about getting there. It's about the main event. David is thrilled at the idea of pilgrimage, and he's thrilled when they arrive. And this tells us something, doesn't it, about Christian fellowship. We're not to be isolated Christians. We're not to be solitary in our worship. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, the writer rebukes those who had stopped meeting together. There's a value in meeting together because we encourage each other. And David was thrilled when his friend said to him, let's go up to the house of the Lord and worship. And then we see that David goes into a description of Jerusalem. Now it's interesting, David had conquered Jerusalem. We can read all about that in 2 Samuel 5 verses 6 to 9. Now when he conquered it, it probably wasn't much to look at. A collection of houses, nothing special, but it became special because it was a central place for the tribes to meet. And David then expanded it and made it into his capital city. But we very much get that flavour as we look at verses 4 and 5. That is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There the thrones of judgment stand, the thrones of the house of David. Yes, it was David's place of government, but more than that, it was a place of worship for God's people. And again, we see this spelling of the Lord, capitals, covenant God. This was a God who was worth worshipping because he'd made promises to his people and he kept them. And they saw that so clearly in the reign of David. But this is where David takes nothing for granted. David urges people to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Just look at these last verses 6 to 9. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. For the sake of my brothers and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek prosperity. David takes nothing for granted. Jerusalem may be a wonderful place where the tribes join in fellowship. It may be a wonderful place from which to govern the people. But he urges people to pray for its future, that it will continue to be a place like that. It's interesting to note that after the Reformation, one of the key movers and shakers of the Reformation in England, Thomas Cranmer, he wrote the Book of Common Prayer, which is so loved today. I may not be in the Church of England, but I often use it for weddings and funerals and other things, and often use some of the prayers from it. And he wrote 39 articles Actually, originally it was 42, but it was pared down to 39, which were the basis, the scriptural basis of the Church of England. And they were written in the light of Scripture, and they were expositions of Scripture to keep the church on the straight and narrow. It's a pity people don't listen to them all the time today or read them as much as they should. But it's interesting to note that Cranmer had many other reforms in mind. He didn't get round to them. Why? Well, we know he was martyred under Henry VIII. But here's the thing. He knew that reform never stops. And David knows that it's never a good thing to just assume because there's peace now, because things are going well now, that they will continue. David takes nothing for granted. And I think that's a great message. This psalm has a great message for us. We should take nothing for granted in life. The focus of the Songs of Ascent, after all, is pilgrimage. It's about putting God in the centre. What's the centre of your life? Will it really stand up when the storms come? So little does. I've probably mentioned this before, but I've lived through the loss of my brother, dying at the age of 29. Another brother who had a burnout in his ministry. My father died at 64, quite unexpectedly from heart problems. My mother had dementia and my wife has handicapped and pains, aches and pains that dog her today. If I put my faith in these things, family and other things like that, that would be a very, very shaky thing, wouldn't it? David says, focus on the Lord and take nothing for granted. And that's why we focus on the Lord. Do you know the Lord? Take a gospel from outside the church. Read it. Jesus is worth committing to. He died to make us right with God, to take our wrongdoing, our rebellion against God. Thank you for listening. I've got a booklet here which you're welcome to take, as well as along those Gospels and other things. This is a booklet based on the Songs of Ascent, and you can happily read them and read good things about them in the comfort of your own home. Do feel free to take one, or you can email me and I'll put it through your door in an envelope, unless you say, Keith, I'd like to chat to you. Thanks so much for listening.